So I'm going to talk about my love-hate relationship with MBL. And this video is precipitated by a recent haul that we had with a whole bunch of MBLs that came in on consignment. Back in the early 90s, I heard my first pair of omnidirectional speakers by a Canadian company called Morrison Audio. And I was absolutely transfixed with the big soundstage and very, very deep, and it just seemed to be such an encompassing soundstage. And again, to put things in perspective, this was back in the 90s when a lot of speakers still couldn't do soundstage all that well, and here's this speaker that just blew me away. It was effectively a rectangle, and at the top of the rectangle you had this bowl firing into the bottom of another semicircle that dispersed the sound, and then above it was the tweeter that fired into, again, another small little round semicircle that dispersed the sound. And that's how Don Morrison achieved his omnidirectional qualities. And it really did have this stunning soundstage, and I fell in love with it. And then fast forward to, I want to say, late 90s or early 2000s, I heard the MBL 101s. And it had everything that the Morrisons did, but with more bass, with more refinement. It obviously looked a whole lot better, and it also cost a whole lot more. I eventually had enough money to buy a pair of the 101s. I think they were the 101s Fs maybe, or Es, I can't remember. And almost immediately, once I got them and hooked them up to my system, I regretted it. I regretted it because it had so many wonderful qualities that it made the bad qualities so much worse. Let me give you some examples. First of all, it cost me way more than I could comfortably afford. I had a lot of things going on at the time, and I just decided I'm just going to buy it anyway, and so I stretched beyond what I should have done. The speakers have very, very, very low sensitivity. I think they were like 80, maybe 81. Insane. I never had a speaker that low in sensitivity, which meant that you needed to use big electronics, big power amplifiers to do them, to give them enough juice to play them at normal volumes, not even at loud volumes, just normal volumes. And from time to time, I do enjoy my music at high levels, and I couldn't achieve that. And if you were to crank it too loud, you wouldn't enjoy the sound. At least, again, given the system that I had at the time, which were the Krells, anyway. You need a big room, and the room has to allow you have to be able to move the speakers away from the wall. So not just do you need a big room, you need to be able to place the speakers away from the walls. Otherwise, you just get a mess. Because what you have is a speaker that throws its sound everywhere in a 360-degree arc. So it's going to bounce off the walls, on the side walls, floor, ceiling, everywhere. And of course, you need to make sure that the room has some acoustic treatment as well. I was constantly tweaking and fussing with the speakers to try and get more out of them because I wasn't satisfied. Now, part of it, of course, is I'm sure the fact that I was not, and still am not, an expert in setting up MBLs. But I did the best I could, and I think eventually I got it got it to a point where it sounded pretty good. Very fussy and revealing. My goodness, I remember I would switch in different things, like a different CD player or a different cable or different preamp, and you would instantly hear the difference. Once the system was set up properly, once the speakers were set up properly, you could hear these differences so easily. They can definitely be bright and lean. You have to be careful. If you are thinking about a pair of the MBLs, be careful with this, at least in the early ones. I haven't heard the very latest generation, so I don't know, but The ones that I owned, they could definitely sound a little bit lean in the mid-range, and the highs could sound a bit bright. And then finally, the bass, no matter what I did, even at the very end, the bass never felt like it integrated with the rest of the omnidirectional drivers. It always sounded a little bit slow, a little bit muddy, not quite as tuneful, not quite as resolved. So those are some of the things that I found with my speakers. But, oh my God, when everything is set up properly and everything is working right, what a glorious sound. You would just get drawn into the music. You're sitting in your chair and you feel like you can walk up to the musicians. This space is just absolutely huge, and you could sit anywhere almost and get this big stereo soundscape, much like what a live event would sound like. When you have the perfect recording, perfect setup, and the right frame of mind to be listening. Those were three ingredients that just promised you nirvana. I wish I had the MBL electronics at the time. I never heard the MBL electronics with my speakers. And so when I got that haul, and Allison can put a link to the MBL haul in the description box below. We recently had a whole bunch of MBL products come in for sale. And so I set them all up and tested it, and the speakers were the MBL 116 with the 6010D preamplifier and the 9008 monoblock amps. Wow. The things that I complained about earlier on in this video, I don't have any complaints anymore. Now, keep in mind, the speakers are different. The 116 is not the 101, it's one level below, if I'm not wrong. But I don't find the sound to be lean anymore. I don't find the sound to be bright anymore. I've got this beautiful tinkly openness, clarity, airiness out of the 116 speakers. I get the similar big soundstage, deep, glorious mid-range. I don't get a metallic character at all, and the bass is beautifully integrated. Maybe still a little bit slow, but it could also be a bias confirmation thing. You know, you expect it to be slow, and so it is. I don't know. I can't say that I found it in any way specifically lacking or a step behind. It maybe didn't have quite the same resolution as the mids and the highs, but wow. And then I hooked up the electronics to different speakers just again to test, and I found that the electronics, interestingly enough, have this beautiful warmish glow to the sound. Unlike a lot of solid-state electronics that can sound quote-unquote neutral or thin or bright or lifeless, MBL electronics that I heard didn't have any of that at all. They had a beautiful golden glow, incredibly good dynamics and power. My God, the 9008 monoblocks have tremendous power. On the back of the amplifiers, there's two power connections, regular, and then it says power boost. I keep meaning to download the manual to see what it means, but it's funny. It's like having a button that says power boost, and that's what it reminds me of. Effortless dynamics, tremendous effortless power, and I think maybe if someone was interested in the MBL speakers, they should look at the MBL electronics as well. Now, I'm talking specifically about the reference line. I don't know about the rest of the line. I haven't heard it, and I don't know how they sound. But I do know that the 9008 monoblocks and the 6010 D preamplifier, they're glorious. They're very, very good. Certainly as a match, as a system, much better than what I achieved with my 101s and the Krell electronics combined together. The build quality of the electronics is impressive. Just heroically made, beautiful, solid. Some people may or may not like the gold and the black, but I enjoyed it. And the other thing that's interesting is that MBL seems to keep their models in their lineup for a very long time. The 6010D preamplifier that we sold was bought in about 2005, 2006, and it's still in the lineup today. The 9008 amplifiers that we still have for sale, we had a couple of people who had said they were going to buy it. Ultimately, unfortunately, they had to back out because they couldn't sell their electronics, and so we still have them. So if you're interested, hit me up, email me at info@audioexcellence.ca. We have the crates, we just don't have the manuals. But the current model is called the 9008A, I think, and I don't know what the differences are, but it seems to me like if there were a dramatic difference, they wouldn't call it the 9008 anymore, they'd call it something else. So I'm very impressed by the fact that the company continues to make their products for a very long time and keep it in their lineup. So, is it all sunshine and roses? No. Image specificity is not as sharp as, let's say, a point source speaker or a point source speaker or a speaker with dual concentric drivers. You won't get that same kind of pinpoint imaging. The image is more three-dimensional in the sense that it's got dimension, width, and height as opposed to a point in space. Sensitivity is still low on the speakers. I think the 116s that we sold are about low 80s, 82, 83. So you do need big power amplifiers to drive them and get them performing at their optimum level. And you still can't play it as loud as maybe you'd want to from time to time, because again, when you're starting at such a low sensitivity, and if you've got a reasonably large room, when you want to crank it, even with a lot of power, I'm always afraid that you might reach the limits of the speakers or the amplifier and then damage one or the other. With the 116 and the 101s that I owned, bass didn't go down that deep, and it never sounded that believable in comparison to the mids and the highs. So it's a speaker that you would probably want to add a really good set of subwoofers like a Rel or the Sonus Faber Gravis system, maybe even the better JL Audio subwoofers. And then finally, my experience has been that MBL's resale values are average to below average. And again, I don't know why. In my opinion, they're certainly every bit as good as any of the competition that's out there, and in some ways even better. Remember, MBL's been around for a very long time, and there are some companies that are much newer, but maybe for whatever reason, the other companies have gotten more press or more chatter, and so they seem to get more a desirability for that reason. But in my opinion, the MBLs are certainly worthy of higher resale value. But then, as a negative, the positive is that for those of you looking to buy MBL, again, I'm talking specifically only about the reference electronics and the omnidirectional speakers, they remain some of the best values out there in my opinion. Anyway, that's my story about the MBLs. Love to read your comments about your direct experience with the electronics or the speakers. Put them in the comments below. I'd love to read them, and we'll see you again next time. Take care. Bye-bye.